When going into projects like Supreme Clientele 2, or we could even say Muddy Waters 2, I feel it's only natural for people to have somewhat high expectations, but I've actually learned with time that it's also important to be somewhat realistic with those expectations. That's not to say we're lowering the bar. Let me be perfectly clear. But it is important to be mindful that those original classic albums were recorded 25 to 30 years ago, and a sequel today is probably not gonna sound exactly how you think it should. What is good, y'all? It's your boy Mixtape Moth. If you are rocking with this content, go ahead and smash that like button. Also, subscribe if you haven't. But today, I'm going to be hitting y'all with my thoughts on this new one from Ghostface Killah entitled Supreme Clientele 2. Ghost Dini, the rap kingpin, the Black Jesus, has returned with his long-awaited sequel to his magnum opus Supreme Clientele. Now, for me, Supreme Clientele is probably the second best Wu-Tang solo album created. Cuban Links is number one for me, of course, but for some people, Supreme Clientele might be their favorite. Now, Supreme Clientele 2 has finally seen the light of day, and we can thank Nas for having a large part in this actual release. This is the third drop. So far from the legend Has It Mass Appeal series. Earlier in the summer, we had the Slick Rick project, then Raekwon, and now it is Tony Stark's turn. And I'm not sure if anyone else feels quite this way, but what Nas is doing with Mass Appeal currently is sort of giving me some Loud Records 1995 vibes, if that makes sense. But getting right into Supreme Clientele 2, it contains 22 tracks lasting approximately 48 minutes. A couple of songs were actually recorded in the early 2000s, but I do believe the bulk of the material was newer. So you have a blend of old and new recordings with this one. But with that being said, let me go ahead and just hit y'all with that track by track breakdown. The opener is an intro from Redman, just hyping everyone up about this release. Now, I don't really have much to critique here other than I'm not sure why Redman listed Set the Tone as one of Ghostface's better albums. We know that's not true. But track 2, Iron Man, has this raw, triumphant beat from Cheddar Bang that did grow on me with repeated listens. I also like the scratching. Now, Ghost here is rapping in a more animated, almost drunken horse delivery. And there's the boastful opening lines. The stamp on the dope was Ronald Reagan with fronts. But yeah, this was just an aggressive Ghost style that will get you amped for the project. Next is Sample 420 with MOP, a solid track with twinkling boom bap production. Now, as much as I enjoyed this, and I've heard a lot of people say they like this track, I still feel there is something sort of cutting room floor-esque about it. I don't really have any issues with it, but I think it is apparent that it was dusted off from the vault. But it's great to hear an MOP feature, as I haven't really heard from them in a while. Right after is the highlight, Curtis May with SP the Ghost and Conway the Machine, set to a luxurious but still rugged instrumental. And Ghost had the ill lines, had dudes out here robbing for that purple tape, chains got snatched, grills got ripped, tripled the murder rate. And while Styles P's performance was solid, it was Conway who stood out the most. But Ghost's hook, these raps like Painkillers, Taking on an Empty Stomach, did harken back to those raps as like ZD from the original. But what we have next is a very rough transition, or should I say a lack of a transition, in the Fourth Disciple, produced by Fourth Disciple. It is a short but punchy track nonetheless, barely over the minute mark, and while it is super fire lyrically, it still felt a bit underdeveloped. So I do like the ghostly stripped back production from Fourth Disciple, and it is good to hear him or see him in the production credits, that is. And the beat does complement the urgency to Ghost's tone and his vivid storytelling. I just feel this could have been sequenced differently or expanded upon just a bit so it would have hit harder in the context of the album. But I do like this track on its own. And this is followed up by Windows, a rugged up-tempo moment here that does feel rough around the edges, but in a good way. I see Scram Jones is listed as having a production credit, and I did like the gritty sample-based production. You will likely recognize the sample that RZA used on the grunge, but this has another raw, straight out of the vaults quality that will make it appealing for some, others maybe not so much, but you can't deny Ghost's explosive energy. Immediately after is the pause skit, and I gotta say, this was really the only skit that I did enjoy. The faint Curtis Mayfield sample in the background was a nice touch, and the dialogue from Ghost was pretty entertaining. But what we have next is a succession of 5 tracks where Ghost is paying homage to 80s hip-hop in a big way. So the first of these 80s themed tracks is Georgie Porgy, and one of the best songs here, in my opinion, and Ghost is of course sampling from MC Lyte. You gotta love that slick, old school piano sample, and the Ghost sung vocals. I feel his singing here gives it that extra layer of charm, but the storytelling was fire, and all around it's just a dope record. Then we have the Force MD skit, which sets the scene for 3 full-blown 80s style tracks that serve as a time capsule, you could say. Like, they could transport you as a listener back to those Park Jam days to show you what it may have looked like and sounded like for a young Ghostface coming up in Stapleton, or a young Raekwon coming up in Park Hill. Track 10, Breakbeats, finds Ghost just catching wreck over 2 breakbeats. And this moment was all about having fun and embracing the earliest elements of the culture, so no complaints with these. It is followed up by Beatbox with Aisha Hall and Ty Boogie, another feel-good moment, really capturing that 80s hip-hop essence. And I found this segment of the album to be the most colorful and probably the most enjoyable all around. But this rope chain era vibe does continue with the single Rap Kingpin, produced by Scram Jones. This was, of course, the first single, which creatively flipped Mighty Healthy and Rakim's My Melody. So you have the best of both worlds here, the 80s and the brilliance of Supreme Clientele 1 combined, and it's easily the best song still on the project. What follows is Sale of the Century skit, which is somewhat amusing, but I don't feel it's as strong of a skit as Pause. Afterwards, though, is The Trial with Raekwon, Meth, Jizza, Reek the Villain, and Pills. So this is a conceptual song that takes you deep inside the courtroom where Ray and Ghost are fighting for their lives on trial. The lyricism is razor sharp and vivid. I love the back and forth. And they're all really putting you as a listener right inside that courtroom, feeling all the tension and the drama. Now, the beat from Rhodes Art is skeletal and sort of plays the background. It's not super attention grabbing, is a beat on its own, but the lyricism is what makes this track stand out. Next, though, is the gem, Love Me Anymore with Nas. Now, this contains a very well-known sample, Love Don't Live Here Anymore, which we've probably all heard many times, but it's so hard to miss on a classic sample like this. And there is this warm, summertime drenched funk feel to this track, which I didn't expect, in all honesty, when I saw the Nas feature, so that was a nice surprise. Like, in my head, I expected the production for this track to sound completely different for some reason. While Ghost's verse was dope, Nas, he stole the show once again with his streetwise intuition, philosophy, getting introspective and political as well, really tapping into all those elements that make Nas so great. But yeah, this one will have high replay value for me, and it's got that knock to it. Immediately after is Soul Thing with a posse cut with Sun God, Nems, Supreme Intelligence, Reek the Villain, Pills, and Iceman Bronx. And it's really a straight up barfest set to a Wu-Tang-esque beat that honestly does feel a bit mixtape like in quality. So it's not that I didn't like it, but it did sort of feel like a leftover from that More Fish era. Um, Everyone did come correct though lyrically, so I don't want to nitpick, but if I were to compare it to posse cut bangers like Wu Banger and Buck 50, this simply doesn't hold up to those on that production front. Then there is the second single, Metaphysics, produced by Metaphysics, and this is a playful animated record where Ghost is doing more of the old school flow over a soulful breakbeat. And this is one of the oldest songs recorded. It's clearly evident from Ghost's voice, which does scream that Pretty Tony era. The subsequent song, Candyland, is another standout. It's a conceptual track, sort of in a vein similar to The Forest, but it's a colorful, outlandish drug ballad, and I almost could envision Cameron or even 2 Chainz sounding good here, from that whimsical production to just that drug theme altogether. Then there is the laid-back Lenny Green skit to set the mood for the one R&B moment, The Zoom. A personal favorite for me where Ghost is going in over the Commodore Zoom. This is signature Ghost in his bag, going in over an original soul song, showing us just how much he is an old soul. And I feel that if you've enjoyed Ghost tracks like Holla and Big Girl, then you will likely be pleased with Zoom. I mean, I think it's really hard to hate on a track like The Zoom. I think if you do, you're probably not really that big of a Ghostface fan. This project closes out with You My Friend with Method Man, and this is another topically focused record, one of my favorites, and the theme here is loyalty, brotherhood, and there is something about this record that does put me in the frame of mind of KRS-One's song Friend, if you remember that one. I'm not sure exactly what the sample is here, but it does have an 80s R&B, early hip-hop feel that does tie in well to this album's aesthetic, and Meth's wordplay is crazy as expected. But yeah, it's a personal, intimate track, and Ghost tends to do really well on these types of records. And then the album ends with the Knuckles skit, and I really, don't have much to say about this. So overall, I'm gonna give this project a rating of 4 mics. So while it's not a flawless album, and I do have some issues with it, I still feel it was an enjoyable album that is one of Ghost's best projects in a long time. Yes, it does play out like a mixtape at times, or you could say a collage of moments from Ghost over the years, but I guess that tracks with the reality that it contains a mixture of older and newer material. So, that's gonna happen. Still though, I do maintain that, different sequencing could have perhaps made that aspect of the album a little less noticeable. But I do feel the album was at its strongest and most entertaining when Ghost was heavy into his 80s bag. That's obviously an aesthetic and a vibe that he wanted to get across here, and he did that well. At the end of the day, this is a dope project. And sure, the production isn't as cutting edge or isn't as innovative as his predecessor. It's just not. So yeah, the project is gonna be polarizing. And look, I'm also not mad at someone being of the mindset that it should have been titled something differently. It could have been better received, perhaps. And I would also say, look, if you have to compare it to another sequel from a Wu-Tang member, let's say Cuban Links 2, it's not as strong as Cuban Links 2. As far as an artist attempting to replicate the sounds of the original, but doing it in still a fresh way, that really didn't happen here. Sure, there's elements that possibly feel Supreme Clientele 1 inspired, but I don't think that Ghost was as intentional about doing that as Raekwon was on the Purple Tape 2. Still, despite some missteps, I honestly feel that if you're a hardcore Ghost fan, there are moments on this project that you're gonna love. And even if you choose to look at this as more of a Lost Tapes sort of projects, there's still a handful of dope unreleased Ghost songs that you're getting that you could add to a playlist. Favorite tracks include Iron Man, Curtis May, Georgie Porgy, Breakbeats, Beatbox, Rap Kingpin, The Child, Love Me Anymore, Candyland, The Zoom, and You My Friend. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section. It's your boy Mixtape Muff. I am signing out, but as always, it's peace and blessings. Ghostface Killah, Supreme Clientele 2.